Teach me about the Great Lakes. Teach me about the Great Lakes. Cha. Welcome back to Teach Me About the Great Lakes, a twice-monthly podcast, basically, in which I, a Great Lakes novice, ask people who are smarter and harder working than I am to teach me all about the Great Lakes. My name is Stuart Carlton, and I know a lot about exactly how much I hate in vivo, especially 2 weeks before a conference in which I'm trying to use in vivo to finish gathering data that I will present at that conference, hopefully. But I don't know a lot about the Great Lakes. And that's the point of this here podcast. I'm joined today by Carolyn Foley, Illinois Indiana Sea Grants Research Coordinator. Carolyn, what's up?
Not much. It is spring. It is shamefully cold, but we'll get warmer. Yeah,
no, it's one of those springs where you're still wearing your winter clothes. You're like, okay, spring it is. I agree. But speaking of being cold, actually, we got a little bit of feedback. So we got some feedback to teach me about the Great Lakes at gmail.com. And this is from, if I can find it, there it is, the Great Dusty. And he says, hello from the other side of the Wabash. And yeah, we asked for stories. We did, about lake ice. And so he has a fond memory of ice racing a few years ago. I did not know this was a thing. He thinks it was on Turk Lake in Greenville, Michigan, not Greenville, South Carolina. If you ice race on that lake, you are hosed. And there's a car club local to Grand Rapids called the Furrin Group that hosted the event. So that's Furrin, the Furrin Group, not the Furry Group. That's a different car club in Grand Rapids.
Oh, it is not. Okay, Furrin Group.
Anyway, look at this. So Furrin is apparently, I've never been to Grand Rapids. I'm going for the first time soon. More of that in a minute. But apparently that comes from Fern, like Fern cars. So you take out your Fern cars, and he has a 1985 Saab 900, which is 9 times better than the Saab 100. And I had a blast. They plowed a path in the ice and set up an autocross course. And he says it was really interesting to relearn to drive my car on the ice. And for those who haven't driven on a frozen lake, there's more grip than you would expect, especially for using snow and winter tires. So the Great Dusty is encouraging you to find ice and drive on it as long as the ice is thick enough, I suppose. And then he attached a photo, which we will put. We'll put in the show notes. Maybe this is time to open a show Instagram account. I don't know, but we'll put a link to it in the show notes. And look at the photo of this 1985. So that is older than, not me, I don't know, not you, but many of the co-hosts on Teach Me About the Great Lakes. And it's a fun photo of the car way out there. And he also recommends the Snowdrift, a rally race. We'll link to that too, every January. And Dusty says it is 100% the best event for spectating that he's ever been to. So. Of course, he lives in West Lafayette, so he's probably been to a lot of Purdue things, which means, there are better spectators.
I totally believe that in Gaylord, Michigan, there would be a really, really, really cool thing. So thank you, Great Dusty, for sharing that with us, because it's great.
So have you ice raced? Have you driven your car on the ice, Carolyn?
Not on the ice, but I have been known to do some fun donuts.
You've been known to do some fun donuts?
Yes.
Better that.
Nope.
Were they powder donuts? Anyway.
Oh, you're nuts. All right. So thanks for the feedback. That was really cool. If anybody else wants to give us feedback in the future.
Yeah, give us your lake ice stories. Do it at teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com.
Or since we're heading into spring, if you want to give us your fun cold springs on the Great Lakes stories. And you're like, oh, I'm wearing shorts one day and then winter coat the next.
Yeah. Tell us what flavor tea you're having to celebrate the onset of spring. That's great. Okay, a couple bits of announcements. Big announcement here. So if we don't screw this up too badly. Oh, were you waving? Was that the announcement wave?
No, that was the drum roll.
Oh, the drum roll.
And then I was making my own drum roll, not your fancy one. And then I started laughing because you said if we don't screw this up too badly. And I feel like there's a 99.9% chance that we will screw it up somehow. But big announcement, go.
Sounds to me like we already screwed it up. This should be out on May 2nd. So if you're listening to this on May 2nd or sometime before May 16th, we are having at the Joint Aquatic Sciences Meeting, JASM, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're going to have a meetup. An informal Teach Me About the Great Lakes meetup. That'll be at the Grand Rapids Brewing Company, about 8 p.m. See, Purdue is having, and Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, we're having a reception. You may or may not be invited. If you are, But after that reception, we're just going to hang out at the brewery for a while at the Grand Rapids Brewing Company, and we'll put a link to where that is in the show notes. About 8 p.m. on Monday, May 16th, as part of the JASM. So come say hey. We'll probably, hopefully, have stickers there too if you want a sticker. And maybe we will try to, we're trying to get together a last minute. This just occurred to me yesterday in the bathroom while I was washing my hands. I was washing my hands in the bathroom when this occurred to me. Anyway, we are trying to pull off, and the odds of this getting screwed up are extremely high, about 98%. We're trying to pull off a Teach Me About the Great Lakes live at 9 o'clock that night at the Grand Rapids Brewing Company. I have no idea if that's going to happen or not. Stay tuned to social media and maybe iicgrant.org, because if we do it, we'll throw out a newsroom article at the last second. So it probably won't happen, but it could happen. And so stay tuned for that. But I'll pre-announce it now in case you're at JASM. And if it doesn't happen, then, well, let's be honest, it was probably my fault.
Or, yeah. So speaking about the JASM conference, that's a huge conference. There's going to be tons and tons of people there. But one of the topics that I'm sure there will be many talks about are benthos.
That's right. Benthos, lots of people getting deep on benthos. And so we thought we would talk about it, but are we going to bring on anybody who has any old job to talk about that, Carolyn? Or are we going to bring on someone who is, I don't know, a professional researcher?
We're going to bring on like one of the best people and most knowledgeable people about this particular topic for the Great Lakes that I have met.
There we go. And I agree. And no way to introduce the guest than by embarrassing ourselves. So let's go ahead and do that. Researcher feature. A feature in which a researcher gonna teach us about the Great Lakes. Our guest today is Dr. Ashley Elgin. She's a research ecologist at the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab, and she's in Muskegon, beautiful research area on the lake there. Ashley, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great too. We're planning to dig deep today. Dig deep, I think. And the reason we want to dig deep is because you study the benthos and benthic ecology. And benthos is one of the coolest words in our lexicon, I think. But what is the benthos exactly?
Yeah, I'm glad we're digging deep because I do work deep. I work in the deep bottom areas of the Great Lakes. Benthos is what we affectionately call, benthic organisms that live on the bottom. They are very important because they have several key jobs in aquatic systems. One is they break down material. They help promote decomposition. They're part of nutrient cycling, and they themselves, they eat each other, and they're really good food for other organisms like fish and birds.
So it is just I was actually just talking about this. So we're working on a project with the AOC's Areas of Concern, a postdoc in IR, and she's doing brilliant work, and I'm just along for the ride, which is great. But I was reading about, and so I always thought the benthos was the whole deal, including like the dirt and everything, but it's just the organisms, right?
Yes.
I did not realize that. That was a new thing I learned when I learned about the different BUIs, or beneficial use impairments. Okay. So is this literally the base of the food web, right? Down at the bottom there? Is that?
Yeah, in a spatial sense, yes. But it is a big component, an important component of the lower food web. But I will mention there are also benthic dwelling fish, such as round goby, as Dr. Foley here knows well about round goby. And there are other fish that spend a lot of time on the bottom. But what I focus on are the benthic invertebrates that live in the bottom sediments.
How do you study them exactly? What type of data do you collect, or what type of equipment do you use, or things like that?
We love equipment questions, yeah.
Okay, well then what we use is a ponar grab. That's the standard equipment we use. And imagine it's a steel claw that you deploy down to the bottom, and it grabs up a clump of sediment. You haul it up back on the boat. And then we preserve those sediments on the boat and then look at them in excruciating detail back in the lab. And that's where you sift through them. You're looking under a scope. You're picking out every organism you can find. And then that's the primary way that we study benthos. But there are some new technological advances as well.
Oh, I want to hear about those. But first, let me get an idea of what this stuff is like. So you pull up, is it like a big slop of mud? Is it kind of like wet and stinky? Or what's it like I love lab smells. I'm a lab smell kind of guy. Yeah.
Let's see. Usually not so stinky. It depends. So if you're more, and I'll be Lake Michigan centric here. If you're starting in the shallows, you're probably going to pull up a lot of sand. And that's going to be more it's kind of sandy sediment. As you get deeper, you're going to have this fine layer of dark silt on the top. So you lift that when that comes up. So you really, really smooth, kind of creamy sediment as you get deeper.
So the substrate changes depending on the depth. And so then Tell me if I'm wrong here, because I might be. I'm never afraid to be wrong. Well, anyway, so the different lakes then, because they have different depths and different, I don't know, shapes. What is it? Bathymetry? I don't know what the right word is. Like, so they'll have, you can sort of tell by what the substrate is, what lake you're in. Is that true? Could you? So here we go. If I took you and blindfolded you and dropped you on the bottom of a lake, and you could grab like a fistful of benthic organisms and substrate, would you be able to tell what lake you're in?
No, but I'd be more likely to be able to tell you what depth I am, but it would be difficult to distinguish from one lake to another. There's certain areas of the lakes, because of circulation patterns, you might have deposition zones, and that'll influence what the sediment's like on the bottom. But it's more depth specific than lake specific. If you're blindfolded and just feeling it with your hands.
Yeah, no. If you've been kidnapped and brought to the benthos for whatever reason. Okay.
If you could touch it and just know what species of organisms you're finding, that could maybe indicate what area you're in, but you're only giving me the power of touch, so.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, and your fingers are probably wet since you're at the bottom, and I mean very little time because you're drowning. You know what? Let's just not do this activity.
Right, but I am pretty impressed that you're like, yeah, but if you gave me some of the organisms, I could probably tell you where we were. That's
You could MacGyver your way into the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How long have these surveys? So do they happen on all? You said Lake Michigan centric there for a second, but do these happen on all 5 of the Great Lakes? And do any happen in Lake St. Clair or anything too?
So I'll focus on the Great Lakes. There are systematic, and it's every 5 years on a 5-year cycle with what's called the Cooperative Science and Monitoring Initiative, that the lakes are visited, and there are whole lake benthic surveys every 5 years with that cycle. And so that cycle has been in more recent years. Actually, you could probably tell me exactly what year they started up. It kind of, is a slow start to that program, or not a slow start, but the lake. So it's now a regular cycle now that it's up and running. Predating that initiative, we do have a good amount of historic benthic data, and so I looked back, and we have I think the Lake Erie has some of the oldest, because a whole lake or large scale benthic surveys going back to the 20s. In 1930s, I believe, that's where Lake Michigan had some surveys where they started benthic surveys. And then Lake Ontario is in the 60s to start more widespread surveys of the benthos that aren't just, not just focused on one small area here or there.
That's crazy. The 20s, people were going.
And that they were wearing suits when they collected those samples. They were probably the classic.
They're out on the the steam powered whatever, wearing a suit. Mm-hmm. Oh geez. So are all those old data? So that's actually another theme we come across a lot is the power of old data sets, right? Was that stuff government collected typically like 100 years ago, or was it? Oh wait, no, or was that the time where you get these rogue dudes, right? Like this one guy out who's obsessed with whatever, and he's out there sampling the benthos in every lake in the world or whatever. Was it that kind of stuff, or was it government stuff, or do you have no idea?
It was quite piecemeal. I think some of them were academic groups leading it, and I know that because you didn't have the established government agencies doing widespread studies.
Oh yeah, this is
the same. This is pre-NOAA.
So that's interesting. These cool surveys, they need to do this stuff or whatever. So we've got just decades of data for some of these lakes, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's powerful. A lot of it government collected, some collected by the rogue ichthyologists or what are the ones who study in text called? Entomologists. I was getting there. The less important ones, right? The rogue entomologists.
Hey! And you're outnumbered today.
Right.
Anyway, so what can we learn from this? We have, in fact, so we have like, one could say we have 6 decades of Lake Ontario history worth of it, I think. What does this data tell us?
You can, going back to the species that are present, you can look at the community composition of the species that are there, and that can tell you something about the ecosystem. Aquatic worms, or we call oligochaetes, they're in particular used to indicate levels of nutrient enrichment or even pollution in an area, because you have some species that are more tolerant than others of pollution or of high productivity or eutrophic conditions.
So I have an extra question to add in here is, like, how do you determine the species of a worm?
With a microscope. It's, yeah. Well, it is coming, you're looking at bristle patterns. You're looking at the shape of bristles, the way it's hooked. It's fascinating, and then also addressing like aquatic insect larvae. You have the chironomids that you're mounting the head capsule, and you're looking at exact shapes of mouth parts. It's fascinating, but it's very exacting work that requires a mounted specimen. You're looking under the microscope.
Oh my goodness!
For the most part,
cutting off heads and
yeah,
like putting the
Mm-hmm.
You've cut off some worm heads, I bet. So all right, let me reorient around that, because so you get all the gunk that may or may not be stinky, may or may not be sandy or mucky in the lab, and you're having to look at all of these individual organisms, right? In this case, I mean, you aren't looking at 60 years, but people have been doing this for 60, 70, 80 years, and so you're comparing those, and you know that different organisms thrive under different kind of conditions. Is that what you're saying?
That's
And from
right.
that, you infer what the conditions are. Huh.
That's right, and you can see there are periods of both Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario. We can speak to these because of these long-term benthic records. They both went through periods of eutrophication where there was increasing productivity, more nutrient input into the lake, and then areas after phosphorus abatement programs where we were being more careful about what we're dumping into the lakes. And with that declining phosphorus input, you then that's a different stage for what the benthos. That marks a major change in reducing that stressor to the benthos. And then, and I'm sure we'll be getting to talk to in a bit about then when species enter the system that weren't there before. And in that way, you can see the major changes that occur when you have a new addition into an ecosystem.
Huh. Yeah, I've got a pro level segue coming up for that, but
yeah.
but before we get there, and so then when you see those changes, that coincides, then it ripples up or ripples throughout the food web in the ecosystem, right? And you can infer that. Huh.
Yeah.
And so with the reduction in nutrients, you find that I assume the water is getting a little bit clearer over time, especially in Lake Michigan. But then another thing that's making the water clearer is the introduction of mussels. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Yes, in the 1980s, the zebra and then quagga mussels were discovered in the Great Lakes, and we find them they're in all 5 of the Great Lakes, and they are present in high numbers in all lakes except for Lake Superior. So I'll start with Lake Superior first because that is the exception here. Mussels have been present there for decades. However, their populations are very low density. They're sparsely distributed, and even though they've been present for decades, their populations haven't exploded and followed the same paths that we've seen the mussels do in all the lower lakes.
Is that because Lake Superior is just not a nice place to live for a mussel?
Well, I was gonna say it's too cool for mussels. I love Lake Superior, but
Lake Superior loves itself though, so let's not actually say that out loud.
But with the mussels can handle cold, especially quagga mussels. So zebra and quagga mussels, they are they're 2 mussels in the same genus, the Dreissena genus. That's why we call them Dreissenid mussels. And they're very similar in a lot of ways, but they have a lot of differences. One being that quagga mussels can handle cold, deep environments. But what limiter for both species of mussels is in Lake Superior is the low calcium levels. And that interferes with their recruitment of how able to spread and establish populations in new areas.
And that has to do with like them incorporating it into their shell. Is that the
yes? Yeah. Thanks for making that connection. That has to do with they're not able to build shell material. They can't make it, and so in these low calcium environments, the mussels, some will survive. We still find some that can make it, but there's much higher attrition throughout their life cycle in low calcium.
So, and this is probably way outside your purview, so feel free to tell me, I don't know. But so, one of the concerns is like mussels just getting everywhere, even outside of the lakes, right? I might be thinking more of carp and things like that, but spreading into various rivers, can calcium be a limiting factor within rivers and stuff too? And maybe that would prevent mussel spread, or the mussels just everywhere? I don't even really know.
Well, you're thinking along the right lines in that, calcium is important, and there is a threshold level where you need to have a threshold level of calcium to have mussels established. We have mussels throughout the Great Lakes region. They're throughout North America. They're in Lake Winnipeg. They're over throughout Ontario, and they're over now in the West. There was a time when they're trying to prevent the mussels from getting beyond the 100th meridian, but mussels have made it out west. One vector being on recreational boats from the Great Lakes traveling, to Lake Mead, and now we have quagga mussels in Lake Mead. But part of what scientists out west are doing is they're looking at doing kind of a risk assessment of which water bodies are likely to be able to house mussels, and calcium's a big part of that. And that could say, well, this lake, this watershed is low calcium and therefore at lower risk of introduction. Let's focus our efforts on lakes that would be more likely to support the mussels. I believe work in Wisconsin looked at this as well.
And so they can sort of make those determinations based on data and information gathered through studying the Great Lakes populations that are. Okay.
Yeah, Great Lakes, and then a lot of the inland lakes, because mussels, particularly zebra mussels, are found very widespread throughout inland lakes and rivers throughout our entire region. And the Great Lakes were the beachhead for that invasion, and they spread out from there.
But so you can, thinking about the differences in the lakes and things like that, you actually have hot off the presses, right? An article out in the Journal of Great Lakes Research, or as Carolyn calls it, Jiggler. And so you have this new,
those in the know.
I didn't know about Jiggler until recently. Back at the same postdoc, got a paper in press at Jiggler, and so now it's my new favorite journaler. Jiggler.
Just reminds you of Jello a little bit. Right?
Jello Jigglers, yeah.
It makes me laugh every time I say it.
Me and my buddy John Downing with the Jello shots, and so anyway, but so you analyzed depths and mussel distributions and things like that. What can you tell us about that paper?
Yeah, so the study that we recently published in Jiggler was, that sounds very
it's a different
legitimate.
Show. Yeah.
What we published, we did a field-based growth experiment for quagga mussels in Lake Ontario, and we collaborated with U.S. Geological Survey. They have a field station there in Oswego, New York, and we put out moorings that contained caged mussels at 15 meters, 45 meters, and 90 meters depth, just catching from a near shore to deeper offshore transect in that area. And what we found is that mussels in the near shore, where they have higher temperature, we measured their food using measuring their chlorophyll levels, that they had higher growth. And in fact, their growth was 10 times higher at 15 meters than what we found at 90 meters. So it's wild when we opened up the cages and we saw how much they grew. Like, well, wait, where did this mussel come from? We put in a little 10 millimeter mussel and now you're 20 millimeters. It was beyond our expectation of how much they would grow in a year. And we just saw that in the shallows. When you go further offshore, is intermediate growth at the 45 meters. And like I mentioned, very low growth at 90 meters. And this connects to other work that I did with collaborators. This is a study led by Drs. Karatayev and Berlikova. They're with the Buffalo State College. They were leading the whole lake surveys of mussels. And this feeds into a long-term record of mussels that we have for benthic surveys in Lake Ontario. And what we have is at each depth, you see a little different population trajectory at each of the depths. And in the near shore, the populations came on fast, they were high, and then we've since seen reductions. Now, they're still quite high, and they're still high enough to be causing impacts, but the mussel populations aren't it's not as dense populations as it used to be when they peaked.
Why is that? Do you know?
I think it's overshooting. You see this boom and bust dynamic where they could have overshot what the ecosystem's able to support. And now they're more at a level of, okay, this is the food that's available. This is where they're at.
So it's a carrying capacity issue potentially or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, it indicates that. And then as you go deeper, the population has just been on this slow and steady increase over time.
In numbers, though, not in size.
In numbers and biomass. So it's both that the mussels are present, but then the mussels that are there are getting bigger. But they're taking an extremely long time to to get bigger. And that is congruent with what we found with the growth rates. It's slow, steady growth on an individual level that promotes the slow and steady growth at the population level. That is, there's no boom and bust there. It's just been like a slow, steady crawl.
Tortoise and hare, that, like, literally, that story. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to cycle back a little bit and bring the drysinids into what we were talking about at the beginning, what does, like, if we were to go out into the deep parts of Lake Michigan, and what would it look like on the bottom? Would it be just tons of mussels? Would there be like old shells from old organisms? Who else is still living down there? What type of stuff is going on?
Well, let's take on a journey here. So let me think. If we start more shallow, it's sandy. You don't have as much mussels. It's a high energy environment. You have shifting sediments. But what we will find in the more shallows is you can get really high densities of mussels, but it'll be patchy. Now I've dropped an area, we've dropped down 3 ponars, and 2 of them will have almost no mussels, and then the third ponar will have 1,000 mussels in it. And it just shows how patchy it is in that area. But it's high energy, shifting sediments, but very warm, higher food. The mussels that can be there, they'll grow and they'll do great. But there's a lot of turnover because of the energy. So then you go further offshore, and this is where you get the depths where mussels are. It's a little more stable environment. The temperature is more stable through the year. The food levels are going to be intermediate, and it's patchy, but on a very small scale. So this is where, because of, and I'd love to talk about this more later, the new methods we're using to actually see the mussels in the bottom and introduce video, is you can see that it's essentially at this depth a solid carpet with some kind of little gaps in there, but very solid carpet. And this is where you have extremely high densities of mussels. Just
a solid carpet of mussels?
Yes. It's a little horrifying. There are videos where we put a GoPro
camera.
Yeah, on the ponar. So you get a ponar's eye view of the drop going down, and you collect the sediment, and as it's zooming up, you just see the carpet, and as it zooms out and out and out until you can no longer see the bottom anymore, it expands in a way that you can't believe how solid that carpet is.
So one thing we talk about a lot on this show is the importance of long data sets, right? And continuing to fund scientists, be they government scientists or academic scientists or, through CSMI or whatever, to keep collecting these valuable data over time. But another theme that we have is like new technology. And so you mentioned one with the GoPro. That wasn't possible, 10 years ago, right? I don't know GoPro history. But let's say 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't really possible.
Yeah, we weren't doing that yet, yeah.
And so what other new technologies are you using to kind of investigate, mussels and the benthos, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. Well, in more recent years, we've been incorporating video data to augment what we get by ponar grabs. Because I think a ponar grab goes down and it covers a relative pinprick of an area. It's like a blind pinprick of a sample you're getting from the bottom. And sometimes, like I said, we always do replicate grabs at an area to get that would give us a little better idea. If all 3 grabs are the same, it's a pretty consistent environment. If it's 1,000 mussels, 0 and 0, then it's patchy. But now with the addition of adding video, we got immediate confirmation that that's the case, and getting to see a much bigger area than what a ponar can tell us. And so I'll give credit here to colleagues from Buffalo State College and also EPA who've been developing a lot of this video approach using different methods to get eyes on the bottom of the lakes. And one of the goals there is to actually get overhead video on an area and then immediately be processing that and getting an idea of mussel coverage, of a percent mussel coverage, and trying to translate that into density and biomass of mussels. And then you'd have that data much sooner after the survey. Otherwise, it can take us a year to process the samples, because I mentioned before that it's painstaking, pick, look, and then measure. So it replaces that, or it supplements it. It's no replacement for that work, but it augments the physical samples.
And so is there something you've learned? So new technology enables new analyses, right? Is there something that we've learned as a result of this that either we didn't know before or we were wrong about before maybe? Or, what has this enabled for us? Or is it just mainly getting to, truth these samples and augment them a lot, which is in and of itself really a powerful thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it just gives us more coverage in areas. And it's something that's very important about incorporating these non-ponar technologies is that it allows better sampling of the mussels in the near shore. A ponar grab is built for soft sediments. It's not going to work if it's a rocky base. It's not going to get a good grab. If it's a gravelly area, any stones in there can keep the claw from getting a good close on the way up, and you'll lose all your sample. So it allows the better characterization in the nearshore zone. There's also a group from U.S. Geological Survey, and they're developing multi-beam sonar as a way to scan the bottom, and they're adding to this video collections on underwater vehicles. And that would be another way to advance the technology on assessing populations. And I'm collaborating with them on a study based in Lake Michigan, and we're to help ground truth their findings with physical samples.
Nice. Are you going to get to go in one of the vehicles?
These are remote operated vehicles, or autonomous underwater vehicles.
Oh, thank goodness. That sounds a little much for me. I wouldn't want to do it, but I want someone else to do it and tell me about it.
Yeah.
And there are some of these videos are available like on YouTube and stuff, right?
You can, yeah. One video that I often use in presentations, it's EPA has a video posted that shows a ponar grab going down, and then you can get that sense of the zooming out and the carpet of mussels.
Oh, super. Well, we will put a link to that in our show notes, which you can find at teachmeaboutthegreatlakes.com/56. That's the number 56. Because, Carolyn, this is episode 56, believe it or not. That's Pat Swilling, great linebacker for the Saints, number 56.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Well, all right. One other thing I want to talk about with regards to mussels. So something we notice is we put out these buoys every year, right? One of the best things we do is put out the buoys. When we get them back, they're often just covered in these things, right? They're covered. So they're out for what? As long as it's warm, which in this area of the country is, I don't know, a month and a half or 2 months.
From approximately April to approximately November.
There we go.
But yes, the buoys are out when it's not warm too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. and they're very often have a lot of mussels. Carolyn, I've never actually recovered the buoys because, you don't want me near field work. It's just a bad idea. But so like, what kind of mussel? Are they big or what size are they when we pull the buoys in?
So much like Ashley was mentioning, or Dr. Elgin was mentioning, they grow pretty quickly. Because, when we put them in, it's completely clean, right? And they are, big enough that you can actually pull them off, but not so big that their threads are super strong. But yeah, I would say like some of them can get up to maybe a quarter of an inch, a half of an inch. And you think about that in a single year, that's pretty insane. A single year where it didn't even go in for the whole year.
Well, so the buoys are higher up. So, all right, I'm going to ask you to speculate. If the buoys sunk instead of floated, please don't buoys, would they be smaller, right? Because it would be at a greater depth. So would you theorize that maybe the mussels would be smaller or no?
I think that would be really cool because we have like chains and stuff. We could
put the depth chains.
Could make that happen.
So that people have done studies, and right now there's a group in Switzerland, and they're measuring in Lake Geneva, which was very relatively recently, in the last 5 or so years, invaded by quagga mussels. They are looking at growth at different depths in the water column. And basically this study and other studies have shown if you're higher up in the water column, there's more growth than if you're at the bottom. So being on a buoy and then being right up at the top near the water surface, that's the prime spot where mussels would want to be. It's also work in Lake Mead. I'd mentioned that earlier with quagga mussels, that they have shown different depths in the water and what their growth is.
But so then my actual question is this. These buoys are only out, like Carolyn said, for a mere 6-ish months. And they get covered in these stinking mussels. And so is that because I can think of two potential reasons. One, the water column is so stuffed full of mussels that they just have to latch on to the buoys, or two, they have like some sort of buoy or structure seeking, system right within them. Do you know which it is? Like are they good at, but then they would have to be able to swim. And I assume they just sort of get washed around by the currents. And so do they seek out the buoys, or is it just more the case that there are so many mussels that the buoys are going to get them? And like if I stayed in Lake Michigan for 6 or 8 months, I would get immobily, which given my body composition is unlikely. Would they all just stick to me? Like, what's the deal there, I guess?
A few thoughts come to mind here. One, mussels are opportunistic. And then two, at certain times of the year, and it's raining mussels. So the mussels have a planktonic stage called a veliger. And this is one of the reasons that they are so effective and they just spread so quickly, is they have external reproduction. So eggs and sperms are released separately. They meet in the water, will develop into a veliger. That veliger then can spend a good time of time in the water column, and they have some control over where they are, because the veligers, we find them more in the epilimnion, in the upper levels, upper warmer waters. And so if they weren't able to control where they are, they would, they wouldn't be able to orient and stay up in the epilimnion. And then they're feeding as zooplankton, essentially, in the water column, and as a member of the zooplankton community. And then when they get large enough, then it's time to start settling out. And if a veliger is of the right size and it finds a hard substrate, that's where mussels want to be. If it encounters that hard substrate, it's going to start to attach. And that's what creates abyssal threads, these little gluey threads that they'll attach to things. And that makes partially what makes mussels such a bugaboo, is they're so good at attaching to things. They foul ships, they foul water intakes. They're a problem for hydroelectric dams and water treatment plants, and you name it, because they can attach so well. But then mussels, sometimes they don't find something to attach to, and then they will fall down to the bottom because they no longer can. They're big enough now, and it's time for them to go to the bottom, and they can't be swimming around anymore. And because they are capable of moving themselves around in the water column, they sink down to the bottom, and then the ones that make it to the bottom, if there's no hard substrate, they will either be attached to other mussels, they will sink into the soft substrates. And quagga mussels in particular, as opposed to zebra mussels, are able to establish and persist quite well in soft sediments. That's why when I was taking this journey to envision what they're like at each of the depths, when you get deeper and deeper, they're still present. It's just more kind of like a sparse. They're spread out and they're kind of sparse, but very consistent, but more sparse. So that's just the veligers that made it out to that depth and settled out, and the ones that survived under those conditions.
So if they didn't attach to our buoys, then they might not survive.
So most veligers that are produced don't survive anyway. It's one of those parts in the life history that there's just extremely high attrition. It's like how many of these dandelion seeds will become a dandelion, or how many of these maple seeds will, all of them. Yes. As soon as I was saying that, I'm like, I need a better plant analogy. The number of maple seeds that become a full-blown tree, for example. And so most veligers are going to perish, but the ones that I'm guessing would stick to a hard surface will probably have better success than the ones that make it down to the bottom and find that environment, which is more challenging.
So really, though, in more than one ways, our buoys are real lifesavers. So I guess to wrap up this part, and oh my gosh, I could just listen to you talk about this all day. You're so knowledgeable and so on top of your stuff.
This is really fun. I don't, just to get to nerd out on benthos is in a safe space is really nice.
I did not know the extent to which I enjoyed nerding out on benthos. Turns out I do. But so I think I know the answer to this question. But so these mussels are everywhere, and like they are kind of bad, right? You're talking about all the things they foul up, and they've really forever changed the water quality in Lake Michigan, for example. Like it's so much more clear now. In fact, some key stakeholders within Illinois Indiana Sea Grant say that the water in Lake Michigan is even too clear now. Without commenting on Thomas's comment, it's just it's really changed. And so Is there anything we can do about these mussel populations, or are they just there? And these, as our friend Titus Seilheimer says, and this is now the lake we have. Or is there something to do? Yeah.
Well, certainly there's the Great Lakes before mussels and the Great Lakes after mussels, and a lot of processes like physical, chemical, biological processes have been altered by the mussels being there. A lot of there have been adjustments and adaptations in the ecosystem with the mussels to be there. So, but thinking about removing them. So one, it's still logistically an extremely challenging thing to do based on where they're found, the pure mass of mussels. Individually, they're very small, but it's just add that up, and it's a huge amount of a biomass of mussels that's there. But a group of us formed in 2014 a group called the Invasive Mussel Collaborative, and the whole point of the collaborative is to advance the technology and the science of mussel control. And it's still logistically out of reach to be doing widespread removal of mussels. However, there are different toxicants, there are different methods that are being tested in inland lakes and in shallow areas of the Great Lakes that are showing promise. And I think that where we're moving now, the target right now is to do, focused removal efforts in regions, in small areas or regions that are of high habitat value. So, and we're not there yet, but that's what we're working towards. So, for example, that would mean doing a targeted removal of mussels in an area that is high quality for fish spawning habitat. And we want to preserve and protect fish. There we go. We want to protect that habitat. So then could we do a regional removal effort that could improve situations in that one area? And that's where the collaborative is moving at this point. Another great thing about the collaborative is, and it's something I personally get a lot from it, is it just brings together all the people who want to nerd out about mussels. So you just get that community together and help understand where's the state of the science, not just with control efforts, but studying the population, studying their impacts, and help to better anticipate what are their populations going to look like in 10 years based on everything that we've been learning so far. How is the ecosystem? Is it in a new state with the mussels present? So those are all the things that we like to talk about when we gather.
So, keep dreaming. Don't give up hope, right? Don't give up hope.
That's right. Yep.
You mentioned the targeted removals. They tried to do that at Sleeping Bear Dunes. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's part of the testing for this. This is something you have to start in a small test plots. And in that one, it was putting down benthic barriers and putting Zequinox, which is a highly specific toxicant for that targets Dreissenid mussels, and in putting that under the benthic barrier and killing the mussels that way. They're also testing now just putting down benthic barriers, which the oxygen drops underneath and you can suffocate the mussels. So that's one approach being considered right now.
Well, Ashley, this is really fascinating to nerd out about mussels like this. It's an enjoyable conversation. We could go on for a long time. But actually, that's not why we invited you here on Teach Me About the Great Lakes this week. The reason that we invited you on Teach Me About the Great Lakes is to ask two questions. And the first one is this. If you could choose to have a great donut for breakfast or a great sandwich for lunch, which would you choose?
Great sandwich, please.
Great sandwich, please. All right. And so I'm going to come to Muskegon. And we're gonna, I'm gonna blindfold you, drop you in the middle of the lake. All right, but before I do that, we're gonna go to lunch. So if I'm gonna go to lunch and get a great sandwich in Muskegon, Carolyn will buy. Where should I go to get this sandwich?
Oh, there are two places. Fatty Lumpkins is known for good sandwiches, and then if you want a burger, Hamburger Mikey's.
Hamburger Mikey's.
Hamburger Mikey's. Yeah, those two places in Muskegon. If you're going for food between bread.
Yeah, food. Why wouldn't you? That's great. And the next question is this. What is, we're trying to help create a community around the Great Lakes, help people really appreciate, what a wonderful resource these 5 Grand Lacs, as Carolyn calls it, are. Is there a special place in the Great Lakes that you could share with our audience? And if so, what makes it so special?
For me, that's the Keweenaw Peninsula jutting out into Lake Superior. I love it because it has, well, for two reasons. One, I grew up there, so I'm very partial. But I have some wonderful memories of it in different places in the Keweenaw Peninsula. But it has white sand beaches. It has sandstone cliffs. It has craggy, rocky shores. And so just in that small area, you get many different flavors of what Great Lakes shorelines are like. And it's just enchanting. So that's what I recommend.
There we go. And that's up on the UP, right? So I encourage people.
That's right, eh?
Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, I got that.
You get your pasty. The UP truly is magical, though.
Yeah. No, it really is.
I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Ashley Elgin, research ecologist. Elgin. Well, I screwed up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Quinn, that can stay in. That's on me. Ashley Elgin, Dr. Ashley Elgin, who's a research ecologist at the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab in Muskegon, Michigan, home of Food Between Bread. Thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about the Great Lakes.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Wow, we shouldn't start designating this right after, because then there'll be an implication. So I normally don't do this, but that might be an instant Hall of Fame right there.
Yeah, no, she's super knowledgeable and just so approachable and just has, I really enjoyed the, if you were blindfolded, would you be able to tell where you were?
Yeah, sounds like she has a better shot than I do anyway. Yep. No, it's really good. And I guess the good guess are the one where it's like, I didn't know that I wanted to nerd out about mussels, but it turns out.
And bentos in general, yeah. And I guess, one of the things like at one point we were reading The Death and Life of the Great Lakes, but the discussion of, moving stuff out to Lake Mead, do you even want to answer that?
Never heard of it. Never, Death and Life of what?
Right. But yeah, anyway, it's really cool. So yeah, and I mean, there's such a key component of Great Lakes food webs now. Like the benthos has always been important. We didn't even talk about diparia. We can bring her back on to talk about diparia in the future. That was like a benthic organism that was formerly really important and has disappeared and stuff like that.
So it'd be interesting to see how that goes through the 60 years or 100 years of samples then potentially.
Right. Exactly. And knowing different stuff like that. And just thinking about all the data sets and stuff is really cool.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And again,
hello again, Stuart.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carolyn. I missed that one. Well, anyway, what I was saying was, again, like it's important to fund the scientists and
what the heck is that?
Did you hear something?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's, these, I'm not really good at like my software. So it sounded like a robot type of voice or whatever though. Let's see. No, I think we're good. Are we still recording?
Stuart, we are back.
Wait a minute. Wilmette, was that you?
Yes.
Carolyn, it's the Buoys.
Oh,
Wilmette and Michigan City Buoy. How are you guys or girls or sentient non-gendered beings? How are you doing?
We have no gender, Stuart, but we are doing well.
Well, that's wonderful. We haven't spoken with you in a couple of years. How has it been? So it's been a tough year for people, right? And when we last spoke, actually, it was just during the beginning of COVID, and you missed people out on the lakes. I remember now. How has the last year and change been? Are you lonely still, or what's the deal?
No, we're great now.
Yeah, that's great that you're doing well. I guess you weathered everything okay and things are coming around?
We are actually about to go back into the lake.
Is it that time of the year already?
Yes. And we have some exciting new.
Oh, I bet I know what it is, actually. So, listeners, as you may remember, Carolyn, you probably remember this, Michigan City got struck last year by a boat, and our good friends at Limnotech worked with us to fix up Michigan City, and I think actually got like maybe a couple of sensor upgrades. Is that right? I imagine that is the exciting news, and that's really great.
Yeah, and a lot of our stakeholders will be really excited about that too.
Yep, all the new stuff, all the new data we can get. Yeah.
I am in much better shape this year. Thank you for asking. But we have even more exciting news.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, here's how we're going to do this, and this never goes wrong. So don't worry, this always goes right. So we are going to, here's what I'll do. You can announce your big news, but buoys, I'm going to do a drum roll, and then you announce your big news. And then I don't have a bump on, but I've got the closest thing to a bump on, which I recently created. So, all right, great. So we are going to do the drum roll and then the big news. Here comes the drum roll.
It's a new buoy.
A new buoy? Wow. Hold on. What? A new buoy? Tell me about this buoy. What is the deal here?
Hello. I am the Chicago Pier Buoy.
Chicago Pier Buoy.
That's really cool because, for several years we've been hoping to get some stuff right off of Chicago. So where do you actually hang out? Chicago Pier Buoy. Which buoy are you off?
Navy Pier, the big one.
The big one. All right.
Whoa. That's amazing. So can you see, when you go out, will you be able to see like Navy Pier in Chicago? Are you going to be that close or farther out?
Yes, I will be right there. Please don't run me over.
Yeah, I'm looking at you now. You're kind of a short one, Chicago buoy. Is that because you're younger or are you just a different model of buoy?
Different model, improved tech, all the good stuff.
That's fantastic. And I've heard, so you're the Chicago buoy. A lot of people I've heard increasingly are referring to you as Chewy. Is that right? Is that kind of your nickname among cognoscenti?
I would love to be called Chewy.
Well, then it's official. It is official. Chewy it is. Let's go back for a woo. That's great. Well, one thing you could do if you're worried about your height, in all honesty, I was thinking about this. We were actually just speaking with the brilliant Dr. Ashley Elgin about mussels and drysenids and stuff. So to increase your height, maybe you could let a bunch of mussels attach to you, and then that would sort of extend you up into the air a little bit. Have you considered that?
No, thank you. The other boys have told me how much they like Dr. Elgin, and I would rather not be covered in mussels.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. So, Michigan City and Wilmette, are you headed back out sometime soon?
Yes, within the next few weeks we will be back in our summer home.
So perhaps by the time we are at our meetup in Grand Rapids, we will be able to be looking at buoy data. That would be really cool.
We hope so. Nice to see you again, Stuart.
Nice to see you too. Hey, and I'm really excited to talk with you all again, and I can't wait to see you out on the lake, or at least see the data that you collect and the images and videos you send back while you're out on the lake.
And images, because I do think that one of the upgrades that they've all gotten now is they all have images now. So that's something that is really always nice to look at. So, and also that was really weird to be interrupted by robotic buoys.
Yeah, it happens to me every now and again. But for me, it's more like weird to be interrupted by celebrities, regardless robot buoys or otherwise. Well, let's do the thing then.
Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. We encourage you to check out the great work we do at iiseagrant.org and at ILINC Grant on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Hope Charters, Carolyn Foley, Megan Gunn, and Rennie Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and fixer. Our super fun podcast artwork is by Davenport. The show is edited by the awesome Quinn Rose, and I encourage you to check her work out at aspiringrobot.com. If you have a question or comment about the show, please email it to teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our hotline at 765-496-IISG. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Teach Great Lakes. Thanks for listening and keep greeting those lakes.
I'm just hearing the sweet riff.
Yeah, it goes for a second.
It
goes for a second verse because I was just really into it that day. But we'll fade it out there. No, that's a Crawdad Hole is the name of that song. It's an old classic in the South.
I studied crawdads for my master's research, so I have a place in my house for crawdads as well.
Yeah, as do I. I have a place in my stomach that I think is largely because of crawdads.